It is also for me a great pleasure and honor to welcome you here today to the Sergio Vieira de Mello Memorial Lecture. I particularly welcome Mr. Kofi Annan, the patron of our foundation, and this evening's guest speaker. Allow me also to acknowledge the much appreciated presence of the Director General of the UN, Mr. Otto Nikitze, a great supporter of the foundation, and two of the foundation's eminent persons, Mr. Jan Eliasson and Mr. Salim Ahmed Salim, all close friends of Sergio. Let me add here that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, has on several occasions indicated his full support to the foundation. Madame Calmire, also one of our eminent persons, could not be here today, but she agreed that the event be placed under her haute patronage. The Sergio Vieira de Mello Foundation has just been established, and this evening's memorial lecture is our first official event. We are very pleased to have organized this in close partnership with the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, an institute close to Sergio's heart. The foundation was founded by a few friends and family members of Sergio to remember him, to promote the important values which governed his life, and to continue his mission. In 2009, to individuals, institutions, or communities in recognition of their outstanding and unique work for peaceful reconciliation between peoples and parties in conflict. Furthermore, to institute a fellowship program in Sergio's name to be awarded to a selected number of outstanding young people whose families were victims of humanitarian crisis resulting from armed conflict. Also, to advocate for the security and independence of humanitarian actors wherever they may be operating and whomever they may work for. On or around the 15th of March, Sergio's birthday. But to fulfill these objectives, we call on you 2 days ago. And it is in honor of his vision, his values, and his philosophy that a memorial lecture will be held each year at around this date. Sergio was not only a man of action, but was also a great intellectual and philosopher. It is fitting that Mr. Kofi Annan, Sergio's former boss and particularly close friend, has agreed to be the first speaker. We were worried that events in Africa would have held him back, but thanks to Mr. Annan's extraordinary mediation efforts and his special skills to promote dialogue, we have the privilege of having him here with us this evening. I now have the pleasure and honor to call on Mr. Kofi Annan to deliver the first Sergio Vieira de Mello Memorial Lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear friend, for those very warm remarks. Mr. Director General, Mr. Eliasson, Mr. Salim, I'm glad to see you here away from Darfur where you are negotiating, but I hope Geneva will give you the rest and the inspiration to go back and conclude your work. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great pleasure to be amongst so many friends. When you meet so many friends, you don't have to try and do something that Nan and I tried to do in the spring of 2007. When I stepped down as Secretary General, we thought we needed a break and so went to hide in the Como region for about 3 months. We had no television, with no radio and no newspapers. After 6 weeks, we were getting bored. So we decided we'd go and look for a newspaper, and we walked into a tobacco shop in the village, and we saw a group of men looking at us, and one of them broke away, rushed us, said, "Echo, now I know who you are. Morgan Freeman." Said, "May I have an autograph?" So I said, "Sure." So I signed K. Freeman. He was happy, and we were happy. So we walked away. At least tonight, I don't have to try and move around incognito. I am deeply honored to be invited to deliver this lecture in memory of my dear friend and colleague Sergio Vieira de Mello, and to serve as a patron of the foundation established in his name. How I wish he were still alive and did not need to be commemorated. As you know, Sergio was one of the group of the very best of UN servants who were lost in one single terrible blow on the 19th of August 2003. It is a date that will remain etched in my memory and memory of many friends and people who worked at the UN. In his 34 years of service with the United Nations, Sergio worked in Bangladesh, Cyprus, Mozambique, Lebanon, Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, Congo, Kosovo, East Timor, New York, Geneva, and of course, Iraq. A humanitarian, a peacemaker, a nation builder, Sergio worked to save and improve lives wherever he was. And in all those places and in all those roles, Sergio inspired and led with energy, determination, and mischievous sense of fun. But that did not hide his sharp intellect or diminish his sense of purpose, which was deeply rooted in the ideals of the United Nations. I have known Sergio for several decades. We worked together here at the UNHCR in Geneva, in what is now the WTO building. Sergio had a unique capacity to connect with people. He will meet people 1 minute and you turn around and look and you have a feeling they must have known each other all along, never realizing that 5 minutes ago they did not know each other. It was a special gift he had. But he was also a man of contradiction who constantly sought to reconcile a life of action with one of reflection. His pride in his Sorbonne doctorate in philosophy, completed in 1985, is an indication of that. In 1985, he completed that degree many years after joining the UNHCR. And his 2001 lecture here at the Institute, the Graduate Institute, entitled "The Conscience of the World, the UN and the Irrational in History," was also a testament of his search. As a man of culture and in the European intellectual tradition, Sergio sought to analyze his experience and define a motive for public spirited action. He respected theory, but submitted it to test of practice. He passionately believed in principle and famously carried a copy of the UN Charter wherever he went, but was more pragmatic than most and was often criticized for it, having dealt with many war laws in his time. We all did. He had a tangible appreciation of evil, but was not a man of faith. In seeking for meaning, Sergio found it in the UN, the organization to which he gave his life. The lesson we must learn from his tragic death is that each one of us has to work even harder to spread enlightenment and tolerance, and to overcome extremism and intolerance. The final chapter of the tragedy that unfolded in Iraq in 2003 has yet to be written, and opinions will continue to differ about the reasons for the foreign military presence in that country, about its consequences, and about the right way to respond. There are many of the survivors of the Iraq bomb attack who are here with us tonight, and I know this is equally difficult for them. But we do not know, that what cannot be justified or accepted is the deliberate targeting of civilians in conflict. To target women, children, humanitarian workers, and to throw a bomb inside a school, a home, or a marketplace is not resistance. It is terrorism, pure and simple. It is appalling crime that cannot be justified by even the most barbarous political standard. And as we saw once again by the attack on the UN compound in Algeria last year, the blue flag no longer protects us. It is no longer sufficient as a guarantee of neutrality and impartiality. The UN has become vulnerable, even a target, in a strategy to foster division and hatred within countries and the wider world. Let me take this opportunity to applaud the efforts of my successor, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, in moving quickly to evaluate the changing threats and the risks that UN operations face in the world today. We live in a dangerous world, and it is incumbent on each and every one of us to be aware of that, to be conscious of where we are, to be conscious of what we may be exposed to, and help those who are protecting us protect us as effectively as possible. Sergio played a key role in making humanitarian action more effective and coherent, and he would have appreciated how new challenges require us to think holistically in order to remain ahead of the curve. Take, for example, how energy questions have shot to the top of the international agenda. By 2050, growth in demand is expected to double. Climate stresses are expected to increase, and the world energy markets will be tighter, leading to more political tensions. For billions of people, the daily reality is extreme energy poverty. An estimated 1.6 billion people, a quarter of the world's population, do not have access to electricity. At the same time, high demand for grains and increased investment in biofuels are making it harder for the poor people to afford basic food ingredients. This trend has serious social and economic consequences that threaten political stability. I recall discussing this issue with former President Fidel Castro of Cuba in the summer of 2006. And as we discussed that issue, and I expressed my concern as to the pressure biofuel is putting on farm lands, and the fact that it was going to push up food prices because you use it for feed, for the chicken, for cattle, and so it will go through the food chain. He looked me in the face, and he was sick then. He had lost about 40 kilos. And in his typical frank way, he looked at me and said, "Tell me, my friend, if we give the food to the cars, what will people eat, was the way he put it, in a very simple, straightforward terms. But it is a reality that we will need to cope with, and it's really on top of us now. Climate change itself is having profound consequences for international security. These effects are not just of humanitarian nature, but also include political and security risks. Acting as a threat multiplier, climate change can worsen existing tensions in countries and regions which are already fragile and conflict-prone. Water shortages, loss of arable land, mass migration, and new border disputes will become major issues for the UN and the international community as a whole. We will need to react collectively to these challenges and, in our response, be guided by universal values and norms. My dear friends, the tendency to divide humanity into mutually exclusive groups or categories is not confined to one part of the world. Discrimination and intolerance breed hatred and violence. We must respond to the logic of exclusion with logic of peace, of reconciliation, of inclusion and mutual respect. We must work to build nations within which people of different communities can coexist and enjoy equal rights and opportunities. We often overlook equitable access to opportunity, and it's extremely important in societies with diverse communities. Equally important is our resolve to build a world in which no nation and no community will be punished collectively for the crimes of some of its members. A world in which no religion will be demonized for the aberrations of some of its adherents. A world in which there will be no clash of civilization because people will strive to discover the best in each other's traditions and cultures and learn from it. This is the kind of world that Sergio stood for. And these are the values he sought to cultivate in war-torn societies he worked in. He believed deeply in freedom, human dignity, and the right of the individual to fulfill his or her potential. Too often, people speak as if there were a clash between national and global interests. That is a misconception. The global interest, the interest of nations, includes the interest of all nations. In an era of interdependence, problems like disease, environmental degradation, political unrest cannot be neatly contained within national borders. I lived this in Kenya only a couple of weeks ago, where some in Kenya kept insisting that we don't need outsiders, we don't need foreigners. This is our internal problem. But these problems never remain internal for long. How can a problem be internal when it immediately creates refugees for your neighbors? How can a problem be internal when people within your borders are being brutalized? I will come to that. How can a problem be internal when it creates economic problems for your neighbors? The crisis in Kenya had major economic impact on Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Democratic Republic of Congo, because they were all landlocked and rely on Kenyan infrastructure for transport and supplies. So in no time, prices for items like oil shot up, food products, and yet some were maintaining it was internal. I must admit that by the time I left, they were all happy that the international community got involved. And I think that was refreshing to see. If some of us are poor, we are all the poorer. If some countries are unstable, we are all less secure. Similarly, we know that solutions to these problems will only come if we work together, across borders, across boundaries of race, religion, language, and culture. We all share responsibility for each other's security. All nations, and particularly those on the Security Council. In 2005, world leaders solemnly accepted the obligation that sovereignty can no longer be used as a shield for governments that massacre their own people or is unable to protect them from ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, and gross and systematic violations of human rights. And if governments fail to do that, the member states agree that the international community has a responsibility through the Security Council to act, which means that if this happens and the government concerned doesn't act to protect the population, we, the outsiders, cannot sit back and say it's their responsibility, it's their problem. We also are responsible. Some crimes are so shameful that each and every one of us has to stand up and ask the question, what can I do? What should I be doing? And I think this is a very important new norm that is emerging. Sergio would have been hugely encouraged by the acceptance of the member states of the responsibility to protect. And he would have been in the vanguard of efforts to encourage them to act in accordance with that responsibility. Of course, lasting peace requires more than the absence of war. Peace will endure only when it is accompanied by economic and social development, and only when a government is grounded in the rule of law, fairly and consistently applied, can society rest on a solid foundation. Leaders must ensure the rules are respected, that they protect rights and dignity of individual citizens. And leaders must also hold themselves to the same rules, the same restraints, and never above them. The rule of law, like peace and security, is prerequisite to strong and sustained development. And without prosperity and opportunity that are widely shared, peace cannot last long and democratic institutions cannot truly flourish. These are the principles that suffused Sergio's life and his work. A person who invested himself in the UN, believing it to be the best instrument of global collaboration in the service of our common humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout my time as Secretary General of the UN, my biggest concern was to make the UN an organization that serves people and treats them as people, that is, as individual human beings and not mere components of a state. While the task of ensuring that the rights and dignity of every person is preserved and respected lies at the very heart of the UN mission, I believe it is a task that cannot be left solely in the hands of governments or purely in the hands of an international organization. We all need to work in partnership. Governments, international organizations, NGOs, private sector foundations, we need to work together in partnership to tackle the problems that we face today. Some governments believe they can handle this alone. I doubt it. I doubt if they ever could. But even if they could, in our complicated, interdependent world of today, they cannot do it alone. They need help. And we should not stand back and leave it to them and then complain when things go wrong or they fall short. As individuals, we have responsibility. As individuals, we have power. We have power in the choices we make. We have power in the political issues we decide to support. We have power in moving issues up the political agenda. We have power in making sure the environment is on top of the agenda. And we have power to force politicians to pay attention to issues that we believe are important, but we often do not use it. Recently, I was challenging groups in Kenya to do that. I met with a group of businessmen who control 85% of the GDP. That is influence. That is power. But when I asked them, what did you do with that influence before the crisis? And what do you intend to do now that they were a bit taken aback. And I said, well, you cannot sit back and let it happen, not use your influence and complain. You are part of the society. You make your living in the society. Your profits come from the society. As individual citizens, we all have a responsibility. So we need to really get involved. And these are some of the things men like Sergio tried to do when they were on the ground, getting civil society and people involved. So let me say that more than ever before, I believe we need strong, dynamic civil society to hold world leaders and organizations like the United Nations to account and to ensure that universal values and international law are upheld consistently. I'm not encouraging the civil society to hold UN to its word and pressure us to perform because I'm out of the job. I was doing it even when I was there, just in case some of you are wondering. For this reason, I applaud the several purposes of the Sergio Vieira de Mello Foundation to promote, through this lecture series, a debate on principles and to motivate the young who will question those in power, keep us honest, and in time replace us. Sergio was loved and admired by many for grappling with the difficult issues of our time and for never having stopped to question or to learn. I hope that the foundation will embrace them, all these young people and all those others who, less fortunate, did not know the man, but will be inspired to learn from his vision and his work. Thank you very much.